Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
So today we're going to be talking all about values in the age of AI.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a really timely book.
Yeah.
AI is everywhere these days.
It really is, and it's moving so fast. It feels like every day there's a new headline about some groundbreaking development or some, you know, ethical dilemma.
Yeah, exactly. And this book really gets to the heart of that. You know,
Oh.
how do we make sure that AI is used for good? How do
Mhm.
we build AI systems that reflect our values as a society?
And the author Patrick Upmann, he's a real expert in AI governance,
Oh,
right?
yeah, he's been at the forefront of this field for years.
So he's definitely the right person to be tackling this topic.
Absolutely.
So the book opens with this really interesting story about Nia.
Oh, yeah.
She's a fictional AI designed for healthcare.
Right. Providing medical services in remote areas where access to doctors is limited.
And this is where things get really interesting, because Naya was actually built with cutting-edge data from Europe, but when they deployed her in a developing nation, things didn't quite go as planned.
Yeah, it was a classic case of good AI, bad data.
Okay, so what happened?
Well, the local medical data in this developing nation, it was incomplete, and it didn't accurately represent the diversity of the population.
So Naya was making decisions based on data that wasn't really relevant to the people she was supposed to be helping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like trying to navigate a new city with an outdated map. You're bound to get lost.
Right. So this is where Upman introduces this concept of AI governance. And I have to admit, when I first saw that term, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be dry.
Yeah, it sounds a bit formal, doesn't it?
It does, but then Upman explains it in a way that's actually really easy to understand.
He does a great job of breaking it down.
So what is AI governance in a nutshell?
Well, think of it as the guardrails for responsible AI development.
Okay, so like the rules of the road for AI.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that AI is developed and used in a way that's ethical, transparent, and accountable.
And Upman breaks this down into 5 key tasks, right? Okay, so what are those 5 tasks?
So first up, you've got to establish clear standards for AI development and use kind of like the building codes for a house.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure the foundation is solid.
That makes sense. So what's next?
Then comes monitoring. You need to make sure that those standards are actually being followed, that people are building and using AI in a responsible way.
Okay, so who's doing the monitoring?
Well, it can be a combination of different actors, government agencies, industry organizations, even independent auditors.
So it's not just one person or entity keeping an eye on things.
Right, it's a collective effort.
So we've got standards and monitoring. What's the third task?
Assigning responsibility. This one's crucial. If an AI system makes a mistake, particularly in a high-stakes situation, who's accountable?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question, especially with these increasingly complex AI systems.
It is. And it's something that lawmakers and ethicists are grappling with right now.
Okay, 2 more tasks to go. What's the 4th one?
Ensuring participation and inclusion. This is about making sure that a diverse range of voices are involved in shaping the development and use of AI.
So not just the tech experts, but also everyday people, policymakers, ethicists, all sorts of different perspectives.
Exactly. Because AI is going to impact all of us, so we all need to have a say in how it's developed.
That's a really important point. And finally, the 5th task.
Adaptability AI is a rapidly evolving field. So any governance framework needs to be flexible enough to keep up with the pace of change.
So it's not just about setting rules in stone and calling it a day. It's about constantly reassessing and adapting as AI continues to evolve.
Precisely.
Okay, so in Naya's case, was there any sort of AI governance in place? Did anyone step in and say, hey, wait a minute, something's not right here?
They did. Eventually, they recognized that the data Naya was using wasn't appropriate, and they took steps to create a more representative data set.
So they basically gave her a better map.
Exactly. And they also built in what Upman calls an explainable model.
An explainable model, what's that?
Well, it's a way of making AI's decision-making process more transparent. So instead of just spitting out an answer, the AI can actually explain how it arrived at that answer.
So it's like showing your work in math class.
Exactly. It helps build trust and accountability.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've got this framework for AI governance, but how is this actually playing out in the real world? I mean, is there like a global set of rules for AI?
Not quite. It's more like a patchwork quilt with different regions taking different approaches.
Patchwork quilt. Okay, so let's talk about some of those different approaches. Who wants to go first? The EU, the US, China.
Well, the EU is definitely leading the charge when it comes to AI regulation.
Yeah, they've been making headlines with their AI Act.
Exactly. It's a really ambitious piece of legislation that aims to create a comprehensive framework for AI governance.
So what are some of the key features of the AI Act?
Well, it's based on a risk-based approach,
Mm.
so AI systems are categorized based on their potential impact on society.
Okay, so higher risk systems face stricter regulations.
It's exactly. For example, AI systems used in healthcare or law enforcement would face more scrutiny than, say, an AI system that recommends movies.
That makes sense. So how is the AI Act being received by businesses?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some companies see it as an opportunity to build trust and demonstrate their commitment to ethical AI.
But others are worried about the potential for overregulation.
Yeah, there's definitely a concern that the AI Act could stifle innovation, particularly for smaller companies.
It's always a balancing act, right? Between protecting the public and fostering innovation.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the EU. What about the US? How are they approaching AI governance?
Well, the U.S. is taking a more market-driven approach.
So less government intervention, more letting the private sector figure things out.
Right. There's a lot of emphasis on self-regulation and industry best practices.
So it's more like a set of guidelines rather than strict rules.
Yeah. And this approach has its pros and cons.
Like what?
Well, on the one hand, it allows for more flexibility and innovation. Companies can experiment and develop new AI technologies without being bogged down by regulations.
But on the other hand, it could lead to a lack of consistency and accountability.
Exactly. And there's a concern that self-regulation might not be enough to address some of the more complex ethical challenges posed by AI.
So it's a bit of a wait and see approach. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears to China. What's their AI strategy?
Well, China is investing heavily in AI research and development with the goal of becoming a global leader in AI.
And they're not shying away from government involvement, are they?
Definitely. The Chinese government is playing a very active role in shaping the development and use of AI.
So it's a more centralized approach compared to the EU or the US.
Absolutely.
And what about data privacy? That's a big concern with AI, right?
It is, and China has a very different approach to data privacy than the West.
So what's their stance?
Well, they have very strict data localization laws, which means that data collected in China has to stay in China.
So there are concerns about government access to that data.
There are, and Upmann points out that this raises some important questions about the balance between national interests and individual rights.
It's a really complex issue.
It is.
Okay, we've talked about the EU, the US, and China. What about some other regions? What's happening in India, for example?
Well, India is really interesting. They're focusing on using AI for inclusive growth.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, they're using AI to address some of their biggest societal challenges, like improving access to education, healthcare, and financial services.
So it's about using AI to level the playing field and make sure that everyone benefits from this technology.
Exactly. And one of the really cool examples Upmann highlights is this platform called Diksha.
Diksha, what is that?
It's an AI-powered educational platform that provides personalized learning experiences to millions of students across India.
Wow, so it's like having a personal tutor for every student.
In a way, yeah. It adapts to each student's individual learning style and pace.
That's incredible. And it's a great example of how AI can be used to democratize access to education.
It is. But Upmann also acknowledges that India faces significant challenges when it comes to AI development.
Like what?
Well, they have a huge digital divide, with a large portion of the population still lacking access to reliable internet.
Right, and without that infrastructure, it's hard to fully leverage the power of AI.
It is.
Okay, so we've got this global tapestry of approaches to AI governance. Some countries are taking a more hands-on approach, others are letting the private sector lead the way. But even with all these different flavors, are there any common challenges that everyone's facing?
Oh, definitely. There are some big ones that Upmann highlights in the book. And these are challenges that we need to address if we want to ensure that AI is used for good.
Okay, let's hear them.
What's challenge number one?
Responsibility and liability. If an AI system makes a mistake, particularly in a high-stakes situation, who's responsible?
Yeah, we touched on this earlier. It's a really tough question.
It is. And it's especially tricky with these increasingly autonomous systems. Like self-driving cars, for example.
Exactly. If a self-driving car gets into an accident, who's at fault? The developer, the owner of the car, the passenger.
It's a legal and ethical minefield.
It is. And there's no easy answer.
Okay, so responsibility and liability, that's a big one.
Yeah.
That's the next challenge.
Transparency. This is about making sure that we understand how AI systems are making decisions.
Yeah, we talked about this with Nia and the explainable model, but a lot of AI systems are still very much black boxes, aren't they?
They are. And that can be a problem because if we don't understand how these systems are working,
Yeah.
how can we trust them?
Exactly. And how can we hold them accountable if something goes wrong?
Precisely.
Okay, transparency is another big one. What else is on Upman's list of challenges?
Security and resilience. AI systems need to be robust enough to withstand attacks, malfunctions, even just plain old human error.
Because the stakes are so high, right? If an AI system controlling critical infrastructure fails, the consequences could be catastrophic. Okay, so we've got responsibility, transparency, security. Those are some pretty big hurdles. But Upman doesn't just leave us with problems, does he? There has to be some guidance on how to navigate all of this.
He does. He lays out a framework of core principles for AI governance. These are the guiding stars for building responsible AI systems.
Okay, let's hear them. What's principle number one?
Values-based regulation. This is about making sure that our values as a society are reflected in the way we develop and use AI.
So it's not just about having laws and regulations, it's about ensuring that those laws and regulations are rooted in our ethical principles.
Exactly. And those principles might vary from culture to culture, but some common ones include fairness, transparency, accountability, and sustainability.
So it's about making sure that AI is used for good and that it benefits society as a whole.
Exactly.
Okay, values-based regulation. What's the next principle?
Transparency and explainability. We touched on this earlier, but it's so important it's worth repeating. We need to be able to understand how AI systems are making decisions. And those systems need to be able to explain themselves in a way that we can understand.
So no more black boxes.
Ideally, no.
Okay, what's the third principle?
Responsibility and liability. We've talked about this one a lot, but it's so crucial. We need to have clear lines of accountability for when AI systems make mistakes.
So if an AI system causes harm, someone needs to be held responsible.
Exactly.
Okay, what's next?
Security and resilience. We need to make sure that AI systems are robust enough to withstand attacks, malfunctions, and other threats.
So it's about building AI systems that are safe, reliable, and trustworthy.
Exactly.
And finally, the fifth principle.
Participation and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
This is about making sure that a diverse range of voices are involved in shaping the development and use of AI.
So it's about making sure that AI is representative of society as a whole and that it doesn't just benefit a select few. Okay, those are some really solid principles. I like that Upman doesn't just leave us with a list of problems, he actually offers some concrete solutions.
He does. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how these principles are being put into practice in the real world.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Welcome back to our deep dive into AI governance.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
So in part one, we really laid the groundwork right. We talked about the ethical challenges, the global landscape, and Upman's framework for AI governance.
Right, we covered a lot of territory. But now I'm curious to see how all of this translates into action.
Yeah, how do these principles actually play out in the real world?
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about having good intentions, it's about making sure that AI is actually used for good.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to delve into in this part, how businesses are putting these principles into practice.
Okay, so let's talk business. How are companies actually incorporating fairness and transparency into their AI strategies?
Well, remember, Nia, the healthcare AI we talked about in part one.
Yeah, the one who ran into trouble because of the biased data.
Exactly. That story highlights a crucial point for any business using AI. The data is the foundation.
Right, garbage in, garbage out, as they say.
Exactly. So the first step is to make sure that the data you're using to train your AI systems is diverse and representative.
Okay, but that's easier said than done, right? I mean, how do you even begin to assess the diversity of a massive data set?
Well, Upman suggests starting with a thorough audit of your data.
So basically taking a close look at what you've got and seeing if there are any gaps or biases.
Exactly. Are there any underrepresented groups? Is the data skewed towards certain demographics? These are the kinds of questions you need to be asking.
And once you've identified those potential biases, what's next?
Well, there are a number of tools and techniques that can help you mitigate bias in your data and algorithms.
Okay, like what? I'm picturing some kind of AI bias detector.
You're not far off. There are actually tools like that emerging in the field.
Really? Tell me more.
Well, there's the IBM AI Fairness 360 Toolkit, for example.
What does that do?
It's an open source library that helps developers identify and mitigate bias in machine learning models.
So it's like a spell checker for ethics.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It can help you catch those potential biases before they become real-world problems.
That's pretty cool. What other tools are out there?
Well, Microsoft has a tool called FairLearn, which is similar to the IBM Toolkit.
Okay, so there's a growing awareness of this issue, and companies are developing tools to address it.
Exactly. And it's not just about the tools, it's also about the people building these systems.
Right, the human element.
Exactly. Upman emphasizes the importance of having diverse and inclusive development teams.
So people from different backgrounds, different experiences, different perspectives.
Exactly. Because the more diverse your team is, the more likely you are to spot potential biases that a homogeneous team might miss.
Right, because everyone brings their own unique lens to the table.
Exactly. And that's crucial when you're building AI systems that are going to be used by a diverse population.
Okay, so diversity is key, but what about monitoring these systems once they're up and running? I mean, AI is constantly learning and evolving, right? So how do you make sure that those biases don't creep back in over time?
That's a great point. And Upman stresses the importance of continuous monitoring.
Hmm.
You can't just set it and forget it.
Right. It's an ongoing process.
Exactly. You need to regularly check your data and your algorithms to make sure that they're still performing fairly and accurately.
And are there tools to help with that as well?
There are. Yeah, some of the tools we mentioned earlier, like the IBM and Microsoft toolkits, they can also be used for monitoring.
Okay, so it's about having the right tools, but also the right mindset, this idea of continuous improvement.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about fairness. What about transparency? How do you make those black box algorithms more understandable?
Yes, the black boxes. That's where explainable AI or XAI comes in.
Okay, remind me what that is again.
Well, it's basically about making AI's decision-making process more transparent. So instead of just spitting out an answer, the AI can actually explain how it arrived at that answer.
So it's like lifting the hood and seeing how the engine works.
Exactly. And this is crucial for building trust and accountability.
Okay, but isn't there a tension there? I mean, companies need to protect their intellectual property, right? So how do you balance transparency with secrecy?
That's a valid point, and it's a delicate balance. But Upman argues that transparency isn't about revealing every single line of code.
Right, it's about being able to explain the logic behind the AI's decisions.
Exactly. And that can be done in a way that protects a company's intellectual property.
Okay, so how do you do that? What are some practical steps businesses can take?
Well, one approach is to use tools like Lime and SAP, which help you visualize how your AI system is making decisions.
So you can actually see the thought process of the AI.
In a way, yeah.
Mm,
It's like giving the AI a voice, allowing it to articulate its reasoning.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What else can companies do?
Well, it's also about creating a culture of transparency within the organization.
So educating employees about the ethical implications of AI and encouraging them to ask questions.
Exactly. And it's also about being open with customers and stakeholders about how your AI systems are being used.
Right, because transparency builds trust.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about fairness and transparency, but I have to ask, isn't all of this just added cost and complexity for businesses? What's the bottom line here? Why should companies care about ethical AI?
Well, actually, Upman argues that ethical AI is not just the right thing to do, it's also good for business.
Okay, I'm listening. Convince me.
Well, for starters, ethical AI can help companies mitigate risk.
How so?
Well, as AI regulations become more widespread, companies that haven't embedded ethical considerations into their AI systems could face hefty fines and reputational damage.
So it's about avoiding those costly legal and PR nightmares.
Exactly. And beyond that, ethical AI can actually be a competitive advantage.
Really?
Well, consumers are becoming more and more aware of the potential pitfalls of AI.
Mm.
So they're more likely to do business with companies that they trust, companies that are transparent about their AI practices,
Mm.
and that have a demonstrable commitment to fairness.
So ethical AI can actually help companies attract customers.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And it can also help them attract and retain top talent.
Because the best and brightest minds want to work for companies that are doing the right thing.
Exactly. And finally, ethical AI can drive innovation.
How so?
Well, when you're forced to think about the ethical implications of your work, you're more likely to come up with creative solutions that not only benefit your business, but also benefit society as a whole.
So it's not just about avoiding harm, it's about actively doing good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ethical AI is about using this powerful technology to create a better world.
Okay, I like that. And Upman's book actually highlights some real-world examples of companies that are doing this well,
He
right?
does. He features a number of companies that are putting these principles into practice and reaping the rewards.
Okay, let's hear about some of those success stories. Who's first on the list?
Well, we talked about Google earlier and their efforts to address bias in their image recognition algorithms.
Yeah, how did that turn out for them?
Well, by investing in more diverse data sets and developing tools to detect and mitigate bias, they were able to significantly improve the accuracy and fairness of their systems.
So they made their AI better and they avoided a potential PR disaster.
Exactly. It was a win-win.
Okay, what other companies are getting this right?
Well, Siemens is another great example. They've been pioneers in explainable AI, particularly in their energy optimization systems.
So they're making their AI more transparent so that customers can understand how it's working.
Exactly. And that's led to increased trust and satisfaction among their customers.
So transparency pays off.
It does. And then there's Amazon, which, as we mentioned earlier, learned a tough lesson when their AI-powered hiring system showed bias against women.
Yeah, that was a big story.
It was. But to their credit, they acknowledged the problem and they took steps to fix it.
What did they do?
Well, they completely redesigned the system, incorporating more diverse data and implementing continuous monitoring for fairness.
So they took it seriously and they made some real changes.
They did. And that's what Upmann emphasizes throughout the book. It's not enough to just talk about ethical AI. You have to actually do something about it.
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other success stories you want to highlight?
Well, MasterCard has a really strong ethics by design policy.
What does that entail?
Well, they have a dedicated ethics board that reviews all of their AI projects to make sure that they align with their values and with regulatory requirements.
So they're building ethics into every stage of the AI development process.
Exactly. And that's a really proactive approach.
I like that. It shows that they're taking this seriously.
They are. And then there's Spotify, which has been using explainable AI to give users more insight into their personalized music recommendations.
Yeah, I've seen that. You can actually see how your listening habits are influencing the algorithm's suggestions.
Exactly. And that kind of transparency can go a long way in building trust with users.
It definitely makes me feel like I have more control over my experience.
Exactly.
Okay, so these are just a few examples of how companies are putting AI governance into action and proving that it's not just a theoretical concept, but a practical approach to building a more trustworthy and equitable AI-powered world.
Exactly. And in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore another crucial piece of the puzzle: education.
Yeah, because if we want to build a future where AI is used for good, we need to make sure that everyone understands this technology and its implications.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll be discussing in part 3.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've covered some pretty complex stuff so far, from global AI regulations to how companies are trying to build ethical algorithms.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. But in this final part, we're going to shift our focus to what might be the most important piece of the puzzle: education.
You know, I've always thought education is key, but when it comes to something as fast-moving as AI, it feels even more crucial. Like, we need to be constantly learning and adapting, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
AI education isn't about memorizing facts and figures. It's about
Now,
equipping ourselves with the critical thinking skills to navigate a world where AI is becoming more and more integrated into our lives.
so if we were designing an AI curriculum from scratch, where would we even begin? Should we be teaching kids how to code AI in elementary school?
Well, at that age, Upman suggests focusing on sparking curiosity and critical thinking. Imagine a classroom where kids are exploring questions like, what is AI? How does it work? And how is it already impacting our lives?
So get them thinking about AI not as some futuristic concept, but as something that's already shaping their world, even if they don't realize it.
Precisely. And it doesn't have to be dry and boring. Imagine hands-on activities where they get to build simple AI applications, like a chatbot or a basic image recognition system.
I love that. Make it fun, make it hands-on. Let them tinker and experiment and see how these things actually work.
Exactly. And through those activities, they can start to grasp some of the key concepts, like the importance of data and the potential for bias.
Okay, so we've laid the foundation in elementary school. What about high school? How do we build on that?
In high school, we can start introducing more complex topics, things like machine learning, data privacy, the ethical implications of AI. Imagine classrooms where students are debating the pros and cons of self-driving cars or analyzing the impact of social media algorithms.
Get them thinking critically about the potential benefits and risks of these technologies.
Exactly. And as they move on to higher education, it's about integrating AI literacy across a wide range of disciplines. It's not just about training computer scientists. We need lawyers, business leaders, policymakers, even artists and philosophers who understand AI.
Because it's going to impact every aspect of society, right? So we need people from all walks of life who can contribute to the conversation and help shape the future of AI in a responsible way.
Absolutely. Imagine law schools incorporating modules on AI and intellectual property rights, or business schools running simulations where students have to grapple with the ethical challenges of using AI in marketing or HR.
Okay, so we've got K-12, we've got higher ed, all focused on equipping future generations with the knowledge and skills to navigate this AI-powered world. But what about the rest of us? What about the general public who aren't in formal education but are still interacting with AI every day, often without even realizing it?
That's a crucial point. Upman advocates for public awareness campaigns and accessible resources that demystify AI, explaining in plain language how it works, the potential benefits, and the potential risks.
So it's like AI education for everyone, no matter their background or technical expertise.
Exactly. It's about empowering people to understand this technology, to ask critical questions, and to participate in shaping its development and deployment.
It feels like we all need a crash course in AI just to be informed citizens these days. Are there any initiatives that are already doing this well? Making AI education accessible and engaging for a wide audience.
Absolutely. Upman highlights some great programs. One standout is Finland's free online course, Elements of AI. Millions of people worldwide have already taken it.
Wow, millions. That's incredible. What's so special about it?
It breaks down the basics of AI in a really clear and engaging way. It covers key concepts, explores ethical considerations, and dives into the societal impact of AI.
So it's a great starting point for anyone who wants to understand this transformative technology without getting bogged down in technical jargon.
Exactly. And it's been incredibly successful in demystifying AI and empowering people to engage in these important conversations.
Are there any other organizations doing great work in this area?
Definitely. The MIT Schwarzman College of Computing has made AI ethics and governance a core part of its curriculum. All their computer science students have to take mandatory courses on these topics.
That's fantastic. It's like they're saying, if you're going to build the future with AI, you need to understand the ethical implications from the get-go.
Exactly. And on a global scale, the OECD has launched an AI literacy program aimed at promoting AI skills and ethical understanding in over 30 countries.
It feels like there's a growing movement to make AI education a priority. And it's not just about institutions and organizations, right? Individuals can take the initiative to learn more about AI.
Absolutely. There are tons of resources available. Take that Elements of AI course we mentioned, or check out platforms like Coursera and edX. They offer a wide range of AI courses, from introductory to advanced.
And let's not forget the power of good old-fashioned reading. There are so many books, articles, and even podcasts out there that delve into the societal impact of AI.
Exactly. The key is to stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. AI is a powerful tool, and it's up to all of us to ensure that it's used for good.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the global landscape of AI governance to the challenges and opportunities facing businesses to the crucial role of education in shaping the future of AI.
And the bottom line is this. The future of AI is not predetermined. It's something we're all actively shaping through our choices, our actions, and our commitment to building a world where technology serves humanity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with one final thought. What role will you play in shaping the future of AI? Thanks for joining us and keep those conversations going.